This is the art of Startup War, and my name is Brian McMahon, your host and sensei. Here is what we know: 98% of startups will fail every single day, and mostly due to reasons outside your control. The Expert Dojo Startup Accelerator, we look to even up the playing field by sitting down with the greatest minds in startup investment right here in our studio in Silicon Beach, where we look to shine a light on your path to success. Now, our guests each week have invested millions of dollars into startups and are the most respected investors in the world. Now, they share all they know with you, the listener. So join us on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, starting off your week winning the war against startup failure. Welcome back. It's another week, another phenomenal investor. Actually, a really good friend of mine, going back right to the beginning in Expert Dojo when we kicked off. Mr. Ron Miller, when everybody else looked at me and said I was crazy, and they were absolutely right. Ron Miller came in and said, you know what? Yeah, you're crazy, but I want to help. I want to help early stage startup. I've been helping early stage startup my whole life. And I would say one of my truest friends here in Santa Monica. Welcome, Ron.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's a real privilege to be here, and I agree with you. I do remember those early conversations, and I do agree. I thought you were crazy, but I also knew that you were crazy enough to succeed, and I think that's clearly one of the elements of what it takes to be successful as a startup entrepreneur. Is you got to be a little crazy. If you're not a little crazy, you get a job working for somebody else.
I like that. It was like one of our startups said to me the other day. She said, "I'm just looking for an investor who's my kind of crazy."
That's true, and there's alignment in craziness, right? So if you get that can see the world in the same kind of crazy way, right? Because there's different kinds of crazy too, right? So I think what she was talking about is, hey, find me one that can see the world and see the opportunity in the way I see it. And truth be told, I think that that's a lot of what runs behind these matches between the entrepreneur and the investor, is that symbiosis in craziness. So I think she's definitely onto something there.
Yeah.
And it's good she knows it.
And it's an interesting place to start. I don't think I've ever started a podcast with crazy being such a major focus, but there's such a fine line between crazy and incredibly inspired. Right? That you wake up one day, and I don't want to say nothing else is important, because that will never be the case, right? We've got our wives and our kids that we love, but it becomes this overriding desire to do something that you feel that you're late getting to. It doesn't matter how old you are, you just feel that you wanted to be there a year or 2 or 3 years beforehand, which then drives this positive addiction to making sure that you achieve it. Is that even well described?
I think it is, because, otherwise, why would you? Right? You were talking about, the wife and kids and where those things been in. Clearly, those are the priority, right? But, just even speaking from my own experience, I tried as a father of young children when my kids were little. I was always home in the door by 6 o'clock. And that 6 to 8 p.m. window, I tried my best to put away the business. But I'll tell you what, at 8 o'clock, I was late. 2 hours late. And man,
you had to catch up.
Yeah, I did. But then 8 to 1. But why would you do that, right? If you weren't crazy.
Why would you do that?
Most normal people, what do between 8 and 1? Well, usually between 8 and 11, you catch up on the local or your favorite TV show, maybe a book, maybe some music, whatever you do for personal fulfillment that's outside your job, outside your vocation, right? But the entrepreneur says, whoa, it's 8 o'clock. I'm late. There's 3 more things I can get done today. And if I get them done today, that's going to drive my idea forward and get it that much closer to achieving the vision that I've set out to achieve.
I know. Listen, you are a legend here in Santa Monica. Like, when you first walked in the door, I knew that you were top 5 people in the space for early stage startups on every level. But most importantly, I think the level, I could say giving, and I could say that you were engaged and everything else. For me, the level that kind of means the most underneath all of that is understanding. So you understand how this business works better than any angel, any influencer, any leader that I would say anywhere in this space. I really mean it. because you've seen it from all these different angles. Could you share a little with the entrepreneurs who are listening? And most of our listenership are early stage entrepreneurs who are looking to raise investment. As we try and, even though we understand that raising investment is merely a symptom to getting to success, success is the only end desire, they need to understand the actual raising investment process. So a lot of what they learn here is about that process. But can you share with them really what that understanding means as far as starting off your own company and making it successful?
It's a multi-dimensional. First, thank you for the compliment. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that I know any more than anybody else. I at least don't feel that way when I get up in the morning or even sitting here on the podcast. But I would say that the understanding runs in different contexts and capacities, right? So it first takes the understanding of your customer or prospective customer. That's the first thing you got to understand, because it's that which is going to ultimately determine your success. If you can understand that pain that the customer has, the pain that's enough to separate them from their money, then now you get it, right? So you got to understand that pain. The next thing that you have to understand, and it's very different understanding, is understanding the needs of the investor. Typically, most investors, even though it comes across a little harsh sometimes, frankly, Brian, to an entrepreneur who's trying to raise capital, but what they're doing is they are trying to minimize risk and maximize return. And if they're doing it professionally, meaning that's what they do and they're compensated for doing it, that's their job, right? So just like it's the entrepreneur's job to execute successfully on that vision and bring it to life, the investor's job is to find opportunities that they think are going to be incredibly rewarding, not just a little rewarding, not okay. So when you get turned down from an investor, I wouldn't say that necessarily means they don't believe in your idea.
Right.
It just means that it's not a fit for them, and it could be that it doesn't fit their return profile.
Yeah. Or just maybe it's not a fit in that moment.
In that moment, absolutely. Everything is timing, right? And, so understanding what, and having that understanding about looking at it from the investor's perspective. And so I think sometimes what I try to do is put myself as strongly as I can in the shoes of the investor. And I listen to not just the words, but if you try to understand the context behind it. And the way you get there is by asking a lot of questions and really understanding them at depth. Understanding, it could come straight up to the prospective investor where you say, hey, Mr. or Miss Investor, I know you see lots of great opportunities here. For you guys, what makes the difference between the ones that get funded and the ones that don't? So, Brian, it's not that I have any wisdom per se. It's not that I have more knowledge, but I have that process where I guess I come at it from a place of being humble and saying, I really don't understand what this guy or woman is trying to achieve with their investment. So let me ask, because I don't know. So let me ask you, what is it that's going to make the difference between getting the deal and not? Right. Because you see so many deals, and most of them you don't fund. And so if you can give me a sense of that. Now, what that does is give the entrepreneur an ability to adapt their pitch to the specific needs or wants or desires or even emotions of that investor, right? So that's what it is. So I guess, again, appreciate the compliment, but don't know that I actually know more. But it's just that I come at it with, I guess, a willingness to ask questions and knowing that I don't know.
But when you started saying, and I remember when you were starting off Start Engine, and there was yourself and Howard over there, and you were in ROC, and it was right at the beginning. Now, obviously, Start Engine is this huge equity crowdfunding platform. But you were seeing idea after idea after idea coming through. How were you choosing the ones to put on the platform? Because obviously, you wanted to make sure success is the only relevance. The more that are successful, the higher the percentage, the more will come on in the future. So how did you pick out those few at the start?
Well, we didn't. This is the short answer. So the idea of crowdfunding is based on what's called the wisdom of the crowd.
Right.
And there's these sociological studies, Brian, that show that a large number of unsophisticated, inexperienced people will make better decisions than a small number of highly experienced people.
Really?
Absolutely. And that's the whole idea of
I love crowdfunding, but equity crowdfunding, but I'd never had heard that before.
There's actually a book called The Wisdom of the Crowd, and it was written, I think, around 2008, and it was the beginning where people realized this whole idea of crowdsourcing was actually really powerful because then you for sure have a hit. And here's what it comes from, whether it's equity crowdfunding like what Start Engine does, or even if you think about Kickstarter, Indiegogo. The first thing the entrepreneur does is they get an idea, and of course in Kickstarter's case you need a prototype if it's some sort of physical product,
Right.
and you take it out there and you say, hey customer, I have an idea. And even though I don't have the product yet, I don't even have the company yet, this idea is so good that you should give me money right now to buy this product. Think about that, Brian. And so what it does is it goes to the crowd, it goes to the market, and it says, hey market, is this idea valuable? Is it something people want to part ways with money for?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes, it's a tremendous filter. But as you'll notice, Kickstarter, Indiegogo never filters. They're not the ones that say yes or no, just like Start Engine does not say yes or no. In fact, it was one of the more challenging things in starting that company because I talked to so many entrepreneurs.
You're saying like, are you sure you want to do this? Sure.
Yeah, but they would pitch their idea and they didn't understand that it's not up to me because I don't know. So take Twitter, for example. I don't know if you remember the story, but when they tried starting Twitter back in the late 2000s, nobody would give them any money. Everybody thought it was the dumbest idea they ever heard of. Who would use this? Like, what, who would use this? Who's got the time to use this? Okay, hold on. The president of the United States is almost a daily Twitter user, right? And of course, not just him, but it's hundreds of thousands and millions of people are using it every day. And so what it shows you is that those investors, those early look investors that kept turning the founders down and turned them down and turned them down, frankly,
They don't know.
They don't know. They were wrong. And if you look at even successful venture capitalists, the best of the best, their hit rate might be 1 in 15. Which means for every one right decision, they make 14 wrong ones.
And they're taking them later stage.
And they're taking them later stage,
when
and they
should
still
have a better opportunity.
Exactly, and they still don't know. So, so Start Engine and any crowdfunding platform really doesn't make the decision substantively, like this is a good idea, we'll take them, or these founders seem like they can execute or they don't. We don't do that at all. To the contrary, our job is to screen out to make sure we don't get crooks or
Right.
people that are doing unethical or illicit things.
Yeah.
Like raising capital that are going to end up, losing money, not because there was a well-intended effort to execute, but rather it's because somebody put the money in their pocket and do stupid things. That we have an obligation legally to do, and we run background checks on folks and things like that. As well as make sure they don't have any securities violation. There's actually a set of rules that we have to comply with for our diligence, but it's diligence
And
on
it's very deep. We're launching a campaign tomorrow. The car that we have in the front, the
Yeah.
electric car,
Yeah.
which is Ampere Motors. We're really excited. They did a Shark Tank. They validated their product. We went through every bit of due diligence, and there's two things. And you know me, I always speak the truth. If something, is going to be upsetting, I don't always say it. But if something is good, I do always say it. We went through the whole process. Blake over there was phenomenal. He took us like from beginning to end to make sure that everything was perfect. And when it wasn't ready, it wasn't ready. Even when it was coming up to demo day and we were pushing, when we didn't have word back on the regulatory stuff, it couldn't happen. And it was really well done. And then the marketing department that you've pushed on top of that, which Tony's using as well to put his product out, this is a machine.
Yeah, absolutely. And the team, of course, over there is really what makes it work. It's not me. The only thing I did was I really had the confidence, much like probably a lot of your listeners, that are sitting there thinking about their ideas. And the only thing I did, and it's a huge thing, don't get me wrong, it's a huge thing. The only thing I did was I stopped what I was doing when Howard told me about the law. That's how this thing started. I was just looking to help high potential young people exceed their own expectations of success as entrepreneurs and managers.
Right.
That's my personal mission.
Yeah.
And that somebody gave me an intro to Howard. He told me about the Jobs Act. The minute he told me about it, I said, stop everything. We got to do this now. We're late. Much like what you were saying a few minutes ago. And I was like literally flailing my arms. Howard, we got to do this like now. And that's what I did because I saw the potential. And I guess I was crazy enough to tie that back, right? I was crazy enough to stop what I was doing and to basically do an entire reset on my entire life around the startup of that company.
Yeah.
And I did that for 3 years. So that's one thing. That's the big thing that I did. And then the second thing that I did is that I've made so many mistakes in hiring the wrong people and bringing on the wrong teams early. I've made so many that this one, I got right. And truth be told, as many people as I've hired, and I'll bet you it's in the thousands that I personally interviewed and hired, and I still make more mistakes than get it right. I'm a little like the venture capital guys, right? And on this particular one, I just nailed it. And I've got probably the first maybe 8 or 10 employees that I hired there. I had to get rid of 2 that just weren't a good fit. And then I hired 2 more, and I just put together a team that were rock stars. And then since that time, Howard's just run it. So it's gone incredibly, incredibly well.
It's a phenomenal team. And you're right, it really speaks to a moment in time. So when for all of our entrepreneurs listening today, and they're trying to consider, do I go for crowdfunding or do I go to try and raise money through an angel network? What advice would you give them? And not even so much about, either go for one or go for the other, but really the how to make sure that it's going to be successful, and any tips that can help them decide.
Sure. So the first thing is, I don't think I would use equity crowdfunding or venture capital as my first line of attack. I wouldn't do it if you can avoid it. That's a huge if. So what do I mean there? I think I have what I call my hierarchy of capital raising. The first thing, and again, it's not a fit for all companies, but if you can do it, the first and best way to raise capital is from your customer. And what that comes in the form of is advance pay. If you can restructure the business in some way to require a deposit against future deliverables, that is the best way to start a company. Now, when you get into things like tech, that becomes really hard because in those cases, you usually have to spend an awful lot of time and money developing the code and the technology and the systems and process and all that stuff in order to have that first deliverable. So it can't always be done there, all right? But if there's a way, if you're in a service business, for example, find the way to get the customer to put the money up front. And what I would tell you is to hone your sales skills, because you go, wow, that would be really hard. The company doesn't exist. And I, like you, Brian, come from a place of integrity. I'm not going to come in and tell the customer that the company exists. In fact, just to the contrary, I'd use that as an opportunity to say, we've got a new concept. It is so far better, so far superior to what you're currently buying in the market that it's worth it for you to advance pay me $30,000 to show you that when I deliver this thing, it's going to create huge benefit to you, right? So that's the first thing, is
And by the way,
customer money.
there's no lose to that strategy at all.
No.
The very worst case is that you stand out with that customer as being an exceptionally transparent, honest, and brilliant potential supplier. Even if they don't give you money,
Correct.
They'll remember you.
And if you've done your selling job right, which means that you've asked enough hard questions of that prospect to show them, to let them see their own pain, not for you to tell them what their pain is, but if you've asked that question and that conversation becomes so painful to them because they know that they're overpaying for what they're buying currently, or that what they're buying currently really isn't delivering as much as it should be, and their companies and they would be so much better off with your product. So you've created dissension. And if you've created enough dissension, that's how you get them to prepay you, right? So, okay, so that's first thing, is get the customer. The benefit there, of course, Brian, is that at that point, if you're able to do it, you have no debt, no equity.
Yeah.
Genius, right?
Yeah,
that's the best you can get it. The second way you do it is finance it yourself. Now, this is really hard, okay? And I did it, okay? And by the way, I challenge your listeners here to talk to every successful entrepreneur that they've ever met in their life and ask them, have you ever personally used credit cards to start a company?
Oof.
Almost everyone has.
I know, but it's I just say oof when I think of my wife's face.
Yeah. Okay.
Oof.
Well, now, when I did it, I was fortunate enough to be a single guy, right? And that said, I was a young guy. I had just come out of law school. I bought a house. I had a car payment and a house payment. They weren't huge, right? This was in the 1980s in Detroit, but still, it was a $1,100 house payment and a $350 a month car payment. That was a lot of money for me, right? And I didn't have a lot. Like I don't even think I had $5,000 or $10,000 in savings to my name. But when I came up with the idea, I quit my job and I lived on credit cards. And my partner and I each went out and got 3 credit cards.
Oh, mate.
We did it. And,
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I happen to know, and I'm not going to use his name because I haven't asked him if it's okay to share it, but this guy He is one of the largest owner of industrial real estate in the country.
Right.
Okay, I think he's a multi-billionaire. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's not public.
Yeah.
But he's a very, 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 very wealthy guy. And I said, Stu, how'd you get your start? And he told me. And he was he was an employee of a real estate brokerage. And he went to his boss. He says, hey, boss, I found this deal. We shouldn't just broker this deal. We should buy it. It's so good that we should buy this. And his boss said, look, what are you, out of your mind? We're brokers. We don't buy property. He says, no, but this deal's really special. And the boss refused to buy it. So he then went to one of his buddies from college. They got their credit cards and they started the company. Okay. Howard started Activision on his credit cards.
I know. Amazing.
Okay. There's a pattern here.
Yeah.
And it's tough, and you could get it wrong. But truth be told, so now I was 20. How old was I when I did it? I was 26. And by the way, I pretty much hate to tell your older listeners, it's a little bit different story. But, I think probably that real estate guy was in his 20s. Howard for sure was in his 20s when he started Activision. And, if let's just say it didn't go well and you lost it all. Okay, so now I owe $25,000 in credit card debt, and I'd have to get a job and pay it back. That's the worst thing that's going to happen.
Right.
And I think, truth be told, you could probably negotiate with a credit card company short of a formal bankruptcy to do a short pay on it. It's not going to look good on your credit, but it won't be a bankruptcy either. And you better have your concept really validated. What I didn't say, listeners, was just quick. Whatever your idea is, whatever stage you're at, just quit your job, run out and do this. Get validation from customers first.
Yeah.
Real validation.
Yeah, it's great advice.
So,
And also,
okay.
you can do more. You can do $200,000 worth of good with $25,000 of your own credit card money.
Yeah.
Because you are negotiating every cent with that $25,000. Like,
That's correct.
You're getting 10 grand's worth of stuff for $700.
That's right. And if you don't have that skill, find a partner who does.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So first choice would be to get the customers to do it.
Yeah.
Second choice is to use your own money. If you have cash, great, use it. This is
Yeah.
the time when you really want to think about, the $10,000 your grandmother left you or whatever. This is the time, to really think about whether you're going to use that. Third is use the credit cards. Fourth, look, if you have a family member or friend who's going to look at your deal and write you a check, by all means, just do it. Would I do that before crowdfunding? I think probably yes. In other words, assuming they're out there. That said, so I would do that. The answer is yes. Friends, family, that's option 3. Okay, so we talked about getting your customer to do it. We talked about using your own money. That's number 2. Number 3 is your own credit cards. And number 4 is an angel, friend or family money.
Right.
Okay, that's number 4. Now, what I would do, however, is again that validation is critical. That's the piece that most entrepreneurs miss.
Yeah.
Is they get very focused on their product or their service and the attributes of it and making it great. And they really are passionate about making it great. But what they miss is going to the customer and asking, hey, are you willing to pay for this? If so, how much? And figuring out a way to meet those customers, right? And so I'm assuming you're going to do that homework first, even if it's, before you invest your own money, certainly.
Yeah, you gotta.
The final thing is then I would then think about equity crowdfunding as the next rung, and then finally I would think about venture capital. But that's pretty far down there. And the reason I say that, and it's very, very hard for me to watch, Brian, but there's so many people who believe that if they just pitch, I don't even like the word pitch.
Right.
And the reason I don't like it because it sounds like it's something that if you pitch that you hit. But the probabilities of hitting, I think, are among the, kind of the ratio of the lotto. I think you got just as much chance of, hitting the lotto as you do hitting a VC funding. There's very, very limited number of people that ever get venture capital money, number one. And if you didn't go
a very limited number of people that we know that get venture capital funding, right? I mean, even the funding that's given
Yes.
is in such a tiny proportion of just a few people in very specific areas. That's very seldom in normal Joe Schmo
Correct.
from middle class.
Correct.
Even Santa Monica
Yeah,
is going to
absolutely.
get it, right?
Absolutely. So I would just, I hate watching entrepreneurs think in those terms because the probability of success is so low that they're just playing on the wrong, it's like me going out and playing on an NBA, I mean, is it possible that I could, shoot and hit a basket? Yeah, it's possible. But chances are, I
Not
think,
very likely.
not very likely. Hey, and I missed something really important. And this one, I think, is another one that your listeners might be missing. So I started a company one time that was in the computer mapping business in the 1980s. And we started it and ran it. We used the friends and family route. We ran out of money pretty fast. I then went to a corporate. In other words, I tried to figure out
Oh, I love that. It's a
what
corporate venture. Yeah,
what
very good.
strategic investor. Now, this was in 1988, and I was 26 years old. So this is way before the dot-com thing. It wasn't cool to give kids money back in those days. And yet I had such passion. Like, you're always saying, you just got to believe in what you're doing and you got to get out there and pitch it. Well, I found out through the company providing the computer mapping technology that this title insurance company had an interest in computer mapping but didn't know exactly how they were going to enter the space. I happened to have a solution that used computer mapping that was going to be sold to banks, which was their customer. So I went down to Texas with, in those days, we called them business plans. I still have it. I just came across it the other day. It's spiral bound. It's about 100 pages. And it's the equivalent of today's deck. And I went down and I pitched it. And sure enough, they put up $1.7 million in 1988 for a 26-year-old. Made me the president of the company, gave me a third of the company and an $80,000 a year salary.
Wow.
And paid my moving expenses to come from Detroit to California.
And you had an equity stake in the company.
I got a third of it.
Wow.
I got a third of it. And so it's possible. And again, the reason why it wasn't about me and my idea, really. It was more about them. It goes back to that thing you were talking about, understanding. And what was it about them? Well, they wanted to be in the computer mapping business. Now today, I don't know, your listeners are probably thinking, what's this guy even talking about? What do you mean computer mapping? Okay, back in those days, nobody knew what it was. No one had seen it before. There were only a few people that had PCs in their house. They didn't even have graphics cards for the most part in them. So this whole thing was brand new. And this title company, though, knew about it. And they, as a title company, they, were tracking the ownership of land. It's kind of what they do. So the idea of being able to have a map that could, do this and basically have the map be the way the data is stored and managed, they were like really excited about the technology, but they weren't sure quite how to get into it. And so it was about them, and it was a very competitive business.
How did you find them?
Through the mapping company. The technology company was ESRI. They're still in business. They created a product called Arc Info, and I knew the founder because he was so excited with what we were doing that he thought it was a great application and use of his use case, basically, for his technology. So when we ran out of money, I called him up, and it was kind of your strategy, Brian, of being very transparent. I said, Jack, we ran out of money. It's not exactly, but it was true. And what else could I say, right? Yeah. I mean, we're out of money. So I called him up, Jack, we're out of money. So we really need a partner in this thing. Who do you think we could talk to? And he says, let me think about it for a couple of days. He called me back because we didn't have email in those days, late 80s, right? There was no email.
God,
so
I miss those days.
I call him on the phone, or he calls me on the phone. He says, okay, I think you should talk to these guys. And I left a message, and I told him you'd be calling. I said, great. So I called him up. I pitched the guy on the phone, and he said, great. Would you be willing to come down to Texas and meet with our board? And I said, of course I would. So that's how it happened. But it was through the technology company who, of course, had an interest. It was a win for everybody because now we were going to use his technology to develop this new application. He was going to get another customer and put himself on the map, literally.
This is huge, and we don't talk about corporate venture funds enough here on the podcast, but it is massive, and what we don't realize is like any market we go into, whatever we're disrupting, whether it's an e-commerce or an app or tech or hardware or whatever it is, there are thousands of companies who will be affected positively or negatively by what you're doing. And a lot of the time, founders will spend the first 3 months or 6 months doing nothing else except looking for investment rather than developing your business. The beautiful thing about corporate venture funds, what Ron is saying here, is you get to do both. You get to build your business with the partners that you want to. You get to build up your future acquisition partners. You get to build up all of the potential money you can raise at the start, and you get to look for contracts as well. There is such a no-lose on this, and so few people do it. So few people go to the top for the big companies to try and break in there and actually get their foundation there at the very beginning. It's a great point. I'm really glad you brought it up.
And desperation is the mother of all great innovation, isn't it? Because
it is.
I mean, truly, I was out of money.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I was so smart, See, people always, they give me more credit than I deserve. I was just out of money, and I'd like take money from anywhere. I was like, I already quit my job. I had the house payment and the car payment. I was up to my neck in credit card debt, and I had to find the money. So
What happened next?
So I got the money, and I started the company here in California, and moved from Detroit to Los Angeles. Started the company, and then all of a sudden the real estate market went bad.
Yeah.
All right. And so when that went bad, we had invested, I think we had invested and spent about 600 of the $1.7 million. And I got a phone call one day and they said, Ron, you got 30 days to sell the company. And I said, 30 days? I said, what are you talking about? Because at that point, this was an early stage tech company.
Yeah.
I said, this isn't really a company. This is an idea. They said, well, I don't know. That's your problem. I said, you better do something because in 30 days, we can't continue funding this thing. And I thought, oh boy, I got a problem. Well, I did say one more thing. I said, well, do you have any ideas for me on how you might sell it? Because I didn't want these guys mad. I didn't want them to think that I wasn't making the effort. And he said, well, I don't know, but take out an ad in the Wall Street Journal or something, which was absurd because no one understood what the stuff was. So it wouldn't make any sense to put an ad in a newspaper.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had tracked my competitors. I'm a cooperative competitor. So I track them, I watch them, I learn from them, whether they know it or not. And in most cases, I have actual relationships. So I knew of a guy who had sold an information company and was coming into my space. And he began to build his company. And he was down in San Diego. And I went to him and I said to him, hey, Tom, do you want to buy the company? And we ended up in some negotiations. Eventually, they fell apart a couple of times. But finally, on almost a fire sale basis, he gave him 400 out of their 700 back.
Wow.
And I moved down to San Diego and ran the company for 3 more years.
Wow. Phenomenal. You know what I actually just, as you were saying that, I thought to myself, I've got Ron here, chairman of the board. I got Tony outside, who's launching his campaign tomorrow. What does a perfect crowdfunding campaign look like logistically from start to finish?
So the optimum companies that are really, I guess, the best fits are companies that either, number one, have some sort of a community.
So he was on Shark Tank.
Beautiful.
Hundreds of orders immediately after Shark Tank. Has his valuation. I don't think I can say the valuation because he doesn't have it yet. But anyway, he has it all set up. He has the Discovery Channel who've already done a show on him.
Perfect. But does he have a community, a Facebook community? Does he have an email database? Does he have a social media community? And whether
he does, and so do we.
Perfect.
So we have about 40,000 in our community.
Okay, so
we'll do a nice solo blast.
That's great.
We love this guy.
So really, at the beginning, it comes down to what's the message that makes it so compelling that people just are excited to jump in and go on the entrepreneurial journey and as a partner. And they are, and they should be thought of as partners.
So for his, it would be, we have this beautiful, sexy electric car like a Roadster, and you can buy it for under $10,000.
And perhaps for him, it's going to be, the mission of the company is that, it could change transportation forever. Something like that.
Right.
It's so compelling. Or it could be, getting rid of our dependence on carbon emissions.
Or an old guy like me gets to feel young again in a 2-seater Roadster while I'm cruising down Santa Monica.
Putting passion back into motoring or something like that.
Yeah.
Instead of making America great, maybe we're making motoring great again.
Right.
Something that inspires people.
I'm going to have to get my hair done properly.
Absolutely. Backward baseball cap, the whole thing. So the first thing is to have a community. The next thing is to think about how you're going to message them.
Yeah.
And how you message them is one that captures their heart. Not captures their mind. You want to capture their heart. And that's what, doing something like, being young again, a young, happening dude that's driving a sports car again. If you get people to identify with that, that's what gets people excited. Or the fact that you're going to change the world for the better by getting rid of carbon pollution, because this is an electric vehicle that can be powered by a couple of solar panels over your garage.
Right.
I mean, how is that? To get rid of, or wow, I know for me personally, I get very frustrated. I don't know about you, but if I ever fill up my car, I got this minivan and I fill it up with gas, and it takes $70 worth of gas.
That's crazy.
Okay, and I drive away from the pump, and I always feel like I got nothing. Probably because I've driven electric cars over the course of many years too, and so those cars you don't take there. But when I spend 7 years, so how about getting rid of that? And if you get people excited about that, because I think everybody knows that feeling. Pretty much everybody that's had to put their credit card in that gas pump hates that feeling. And if it's like liberating people from the oil companies.
So you're speaking to a pain and you're speaking to the heart at the same time.
Exactly.
Right.
Both. Yeah. And so that's what you do. Then the next step is to deliver the message elegantly. Both the video content and the written content have to be really, really professional.
Right.
Because at this point, you don't have a company I know there's a prototype of the car.
Yeah.
But people need to believe, and the better that visual representation and the better the written representation is, the more real it becomes.
Right.
And that's the idea, is to make it real.
Yeah.
So that's the next thing, is to make sure that it's presented very, very professionally. And then the next step after that is relentless promotion. Relentless promotion.
To everyone.
To everybody. So in the case of the little car, for example, maybe it's the idea of getting some influencers, right? Some influencers either in the automotive industry or in the investment industry or in any industry, some influencers that might come down for an event. And at the event, the idea would be is they could film themselves driving the car. You could have the hair grease or whatever, the backwards baseball caps and making motoring great again or whatever you're going to do, right? And you give them the visual stuff and you create this event. But you have to be creative and relentless in your execution. So when you're actually running a campaign, and anybody that's ever run a successful crowdfunding campaign will tell you this, whether it's in the equity space or whether it's in the reward donation, the Kickstarter, Indiegogo stuff, they'll tell you need to be 100% focused. Focused on what? Promote, 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 promote. So that means, bringing in those influencers. And then the next day, maybe you're going to drive the little car down at 11:45 in the morning to the LA Times office. And you're going to sit outside until the automotive journalist or the business, writers come out for lunch. Hey, come here for a sec. You find out who they are, you get their picture, you go see them, and you get that proverbial arm around them. You say, hey, why don't you take my car out for a drive? Literally on the spot. So you see there's this kind of relentless, passionate execution that says, I'm not hiring a publicist. I'm not expecting to send out on PR Newswire, pay my $150, and then the story gets picked up. It doesn't work that way.
No.
So you have to be creative and you have to be relentless in, how can I get to them? Where you realize that literally your whole dream is riding on this. That's why you're going to do it.
Yeah.
This isn't a workaday job. This is like your dream, your whole life dream. I mean, come on. That's who your listeners are. They've got this fire burning. They got the idea. Now the question is how are they going to raise the money? So, and you got to keep doing that for anywhere from 90 to 180 days, just over and over and over again. Now, the cool thing about it, Brian, in the crowdfunding space is that when you do that, let's use our LA Times example. If you're successful, you've just taken your brand and your product, and hopefully you've gotten it on the front page of the business section of the LA Times. That helps promote your brand and your product, whether you raise the money or you don't.
It's wonderful.
So it's a 2-for-1.
One of the things I love about equity crowdfunding, it's the Harley Davidson effect. You ain't moving to Honda anytime soon, right? You got your bike, you got your jacket, you got your gang, you got your clubhouse. It's just your Harley Davidson.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you can create that community where they care more about the community than whether the product is 2 cents cheaper or 2 cents more expensive, it's about what it means.
Right.
What it feels like.
Absolutely. There was a really great one that I loved. This was in a real estate play, but it was equity crowdfunding, and they did a redevelopment of the Hard Rock Hotel in Palm Springs, California.
Wow.
And if you put in the money, there is an owner's table at the bar, and there is an owner's cabana at the pool.
Come on.
For real.
Good. That's great.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's think about that. If you're, a single, 30-year-old male, and you like Palm Springs, and you go out there, every year, and you spend a little time, now you get to sit at the table. So again, the community becomes more valuable.
They have one in the UK, which was a brewery. I'm sure it was the UK, and you get your owner's beer.
Right.
So the owner had a specific beer in a specific bottle that when you walk in there and you say, I'll have one of the owner's beers, please, they take out your beer, which nobody else can get.
Right.
Come on, that's worth 10 grand on its own.
That's what you were referring to as the Harley-Davidson effect of equity crowdfunding, because now, again, the value of being connected to that brand and that company, which is really kind of a millennial concept, much more important. I'm a baby boomer, so for my generation, it was really more about value. Like, was this a good deal? Was it not? Does this car get 2 more miles to the gallon? Okay, I'll take it. But we weren't so much interested in our connection to the brand itself. And whereas today, millennials, that's really important. The ethics of that brand, the integrity of that brand, that feel of that brand, the Harley-Davidson effect, perhaps you'd want to call it. But that is so important. And if your product, your service, your technology is designed for those markets, you should give some thought to how you're going to get the Harley-Davidson effect for your technology, for your company.
I'm going to keep you updated. I'll keep everyone updated. I just appreciate your friendship. I appreciate everything you do for startup. You have mentored more startups in here, given advice, given help. I can't count how many companies have got funded because of everything that you've created over there with Howard at Start Engine. So it's just phenomenal to have you in the ecosystem. As I said, I appreciate you as a friend. We're going to do this for many, many, many years to come, and still be in this space in 30 years' time when they're going to be saying, can you get those old codgers the hell out of here? And we're like, hell no, we're here. Hey, thanks, Ron. Hey, by the way, how can people contact you?
So I'm Ron at startengine.com. So real simple, it's just Ron at startengine.com. And if I could do anything to help any of your listeners, Brian, like you were saying, it's really, I do this because it's my passion. I feel that I've been so blessed in life to have had the success that I've had, that now is my opportunity to give back. And although I don't personally invest directly in startups, I want to help every single one of them become successful, because my belief at the core, and what this is all driven about, Brian, is I believe what makes this country great is our entrepreneurs. We're innovators. That's what we do. We're the people that lead the world on all kinds of innovation, for good and for bad. I think we've innovated some of the best military equipment ever, but we've certainly innovated some of the best communication technology and transportation technology and aviation technology. I mean, all this great stuff, right? And the way that we can bring that to life is by having entrepreneurs who are willing and able to leave their corporate world behind and move forward as entrepreneurs. And I really believe that. And so anything that I could do to help your listeners, your community, the dojo members become successful, it's absolutely a pleasure. So it's Ron at startengine.com.
Thanks, mate. And I actually never add anything on, but I do want to add one tiny little thing on, because you just reminded me I should have mentioned it. You can go on your own and look for individual angels who invest money in you, or you can look at influencers in the community, Start Engine type companies that have access to investors. How many investors are on the database of Start Engine?
So there's about 130,000, 140, probably it's 140 by now, that are registered on the Start Engine platform, of which about a third of those, so somewhere in the 30 to 40,000 range, have actually invested in one of the companies.
So when you say you don't invest in startups, you invest like 130,000 times a day, because every single one of those startups are not getting access to one person with one funnel who can do maybe 2 or 3 deals a month. You're getting access to friggin' hundreds of thousands of investors. It's crazy. And that's what it's all about today. Work smarter and harder, actually, and build the greatest startup in the world. Ron, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
And that's a wrap.
Thanks for joining us. If you know any other entrepreneur equally ambitious as you, then share this podcast by paying it forward to other entrepreneurs who are building your own army. Now, as always, our website, expertdojo.com, is packed with information to help you grow your business, find investment, and train for victory. We also walk our talk and invest in startups every year in our accelerator here in Silicon Beach. You can always reach out to me at brian@expertdojo.com, and I look forward to being back here again at our regular time next Tuesday, 10 a.m. with another of the world's top investors, helping you win the war against startup failure.